Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this Moore Thompson webinar in regards to the EU exit, progress, issues and opportunities. Just before we start, I just want to let you know that this will be recorded and we will be able to send a copy of this webinar in an email to all attendees by tomorrow. So if there is anything that you might miss, or if you might need to head off early for whatever reason, then you should get a recording of this webinar. Just to let you know, there will be a chance for Q&A questions at the end of the webinar, which we can direct at Mike to answer. So if you do have anything, we've suspended the chat for today. So if you do have any questions or any issues that you want to raise, then please save them to the end, and then there will be an opportunity to have a question raised at Mike there. So Brexit. Yeah, I think really in the last year that C word COVID has kind of been the main thing in everyone's lips at the minute. So Brexit kind of really got pushed aside, and it only sort of came to everyone's attention probably towards November, December, while the UK was trying to negotiate a deal with the EU, which thankfully they did. And then people just thought, oh, hang on a sec, we've got to do something here, and Brexit is happening. So we've got Mike here today, Mike Stokes from Exportential Limited, who's going to give you a bit of a rundown of all the things that have happened since the 1st of January and all the issues that you need to be aware of, and also the opportunities are available for business as well. So Mike, if you want to proceed, then yeah, we'll listen to what you've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you to Moore Thompson for the invitation today. Thank you. Bit of an introduction. I was an exporter myself for 20 years. Started my own export consultancy 17 years ago, and as well as doing freelance export consultancy work, I do some work for the Department for International Trade, the DIT, and also since the last March, I've been engaged by Business Lincolnshire, initially as a pre-Brexit advisor, and since December as a post-Brexit advisor. So no political comments from me today. It's just a question of where we are, what's changed in the last 2 months, what issues there are at the moment. And I've spoken to 150 SMEs in the last 8 weeks, so I've got a fair idea of what's happening out there. And following on from issues, we'll look at opportunities going forward and reasons to be optimistic. So a few slides to go through with you, and a Q&A session at the end. So let's start off by looking at where we are today, what's happened so far. We actually left the European Union 13 months ago, end of January last year, and then followed an 11-month transition period, which ended at the end of December. On that date, the 31st of December, we left the single market and we left the EU customs union. And most of the changes we've seen are as a result of leaving that customs union. The good news was that on the 24th of December, finally, we did a trade deal with the EU. So we now have a trade deal in place with the 27 countries of the EU. If you're looking for some light reading one day, the official trade and cooperation agreement, which is the so-called Christmas Eve agreement, it has over 1,200 pages, 57 annexes, and even the contents takes 4 pages. I have read a fair bit of it, and I have to say that it's well indexed, and if you know what you're looking for, it's not that difficult to find your way around. But it is a substantial document if you're looking for something to read, certainly. So the Christmas Eve agreement was set in place to agree a trade deal between the United Kingdom and the 27 countries of the EU, and that received, deservedly so, good publicity. It was well reported. What wasn't reported so much is what's been going on the last 18 months, as well as the 27 countries of the EU. We also have trade deals now with over 60 other countries outside the EU. This is Liz Truss's team. They've been negotiating continually for a long time now, and in the background of all the EU negotiations, they managed to do deals with 60 other countries. So to give you an idea of where it looks in global terms, we have a trade agreement in place with the 27 countries in the EU. That's on the left-hand side of the chart there. In the middle part, there's 60 countries there with whom we have separate trade agreements, and there's some quite big hitters in there. People like Japan and South Korea, South Africa, Switzerland, and so on, Norway. So important trading partners, and we have trade agreements in place with those already. This chart's getting a bit out of date because last week we did a deal with Ghana, and we have an agreement in principle with Canada, which we both agreed to revise with a new bespoke agreement very shortly, so that they can be added to that list. A few other countries we're working on that not quite there yet, people like Albania and Algeria. And we've also got a situation where we have what's called a mutual recognition agreement with 3 of our very closest allies, Australia, New Zealand, and the USA. There should be full trade agreements with Australia, New Zealand very shortly. USA, not sure. I can't imagine it's top of Joe Biden's to-do list at the moment, but in principle, there's an agreement to at least look forward and put a formal agreement in place in due course. In addition to all that, there's also a group of countries which come classified as the GSP, the General System of Preference. These are all developing countries, and any products coming into the UK from those countries incur either a very preferential, low, or even 0 rate of duty. The principal one there, of course, is India. So where we are now, basically, is that we have agreements with something like 160 countries around the world. There are 193 countries in the United Nations, so it covers most of the world. The 3 biggest trading nations that we don't have agreements with are China, Russia, and Brazil. And I don't think there's any chance of an agreement anytime soon with China. No one has trade agreements with China, so those 3 are missing. But apart from that, we're covering most of the world. So very few barriers. Right. So that's where we are. What actually changed in January? As at the 31st of December, we left the customs union. And so the biggest single change is that whereas before all of our non-EU imports and exports required customs declarations, now all of our imports and exports require customs declarations, including transactions with the EU. So irrespective of whether there's a trade deal or not, we now have to do customs declarations for everything coming in and out of the country. The carriers also have to do safety and security declarations for each transaction. But the important thing there is not only are customs declarations required, it's important that traders confirm with whoever's going to do the customs declarations for them. To do a customs declaration, the first thing you have to fill in is something called an Iori number, which is Economic Operators Registration and Identification Number. That's why it's been abbreviated. Iori numbers are required for all declarations. And if you don't have an Iori number, your goods will not move. It's as simple as that. It's the first thing that carriers, customs officials, etc. will ask of you. What's your Iori number? So all imports, all exports, you need an Iori number now, and you need the customs declaration. In addition to that, depending on the sector in which you operate, there could be a few additional things as well. So for instance, if you're exporting live animals or animal products, you'll need an export health certificate. And obviously what's close to myself, I'm in South Lincolnshire, the export of plants, phytosanitary certificates are required. In some cases, other specialist sector-specific certificates are required. And one change is that before December, we didn't need export licenses for dual-use products or military products going to the EU. We do now. So quite a few additional things there. The declarations is for everyone. The others depending on which sector you're active. Border controls have been introduced, but we've introduced them in 3 stages. The first stage was that all controlled goods, which is like excise, so tobacco, alcohol, perfume, and also military goods, they require full declaration straight away. But and imports of live animals require declarations. Everything else could be deferred for up to 6 months, so up to the end of June. My advice is do it now, why wait? But you can, if you wish, defer the declaration until the end of June. From 1st of April, the second stage of the procedure comes in place, where any products of animal origin, so we're talking about meat, we're talking about dairy products, even honey. So they'll require full declarations from then. And as of the 1st of July, no more deferments, no more exceptions. All imports will be fully controlled from that date. And for those of you using Intrastat, Intrastat still remains in place for imports for the rest of this year. So three-stage procedure for import controls, but that's not the case on exports. On exports, there's just one stage. The EU imposed full import controls on the 1st of January. No deferments, no exceptions. So that's already happening. That's up and running now. So what was impressive with the as regards border controls is that the French had done some very good work in the months leading up to Brexit. They've converted 8 of their channel ports from Roscoff in the west to Dunkirk in the east to smart border points, and so that all imports are pre-registered in advance, and the automatic vehicle number plate reading equipment just checks off that your vehicle has made a customs declaration, and through it goes. So that's all happening now. Something else I want to say to you is that one big change on the 1st of January is what's known as the Northern Ireland Protocol. This wasn't dependent upon a trade deal with the EU. This came into being on the 1st of January anyway. What it means is that that Northern Ireland remains part of the UK customs territory. It's still part of the UK, and so any trade agreements the UK has, they apply to Northern Ireland as well. However, Northern Ireland also has its foot in the EU camp. So its trade with the Irish Republic is covered by the EU's customs code, not the UK's. So basically, Northern Ireland has applied a few EU single market rules to avoid a regulatory border. They don't want to go in the well, as was agreed in the Good Friday Peace Agreement some years ago. We don't want physical borders between North and South, and they've had enough problems there. So to avoid that, Northern Ireland has effectively a foot in both trading camps. They've been promised what's called unfettered access to the UK. But what it does mean is that anyone operating between UK and Northern Ireland requires an additional Iori number, one with an XI prefix, as well as their GB prefix. To help businesses to cope with Northern Ireland, the government has set up an organisation called the Trader Support Service, the TSS. It's a free of charge service, and businesses are highly recommended to register with them if they have any plans to do business in Northern Ireland. Looking at the Northern Ireland situation, the best adjective I can use is complex. And I'm going to move on from there. So moving on to other things that have changed in January, looking at employing individuals, any EU nationals who were working in the UK before the end of December could have applied for what's called settled status, and they've still got until the end of June to do that. So if they were living here and working here before the 31st of December, they should have settled status by now. And the feedback I'm getting from businesses is that this is pretty much a done deal. I think most businesses have already had this in hand for some time. But if anyone has not done so yet, they can still get settled status by the end of June. The UK's new immigration laws came into place on the 1st of January, so anyone not working here before the 31st of December is now subject to the new immigration laws. This is the points-based system, which is already happening. So if anyone doesn't have settled status and wasn't here before then, they are now subject to the new laws. The question I get asked is, okay, well, what about business trips to the EU? Can I still make business trips to the EU? Yes, you can. Your passport must have at least 6 months to run, otherwise you get held up at the immigration desk. And you can work in the EU without a visa, without a work permit, as long as you don't spend more than 90 days out of 180 in the EU. And that's 90 days in total, not 90 days per country. So if you don't spend any more than that, you don't need a visa or a work permit. I'm not sure if you need a visa or a work permit otherwise. It might be either, it might be both. But if you're there more than 90 days in 6 months, then you will need more than just a passport. No meat or dairy products can be taken into the EU. I think you saw the case where a truck driver was told he couldn't take his cheese sandwich in, which seems a bit harsh to me. But in principle, no meat or dairy products can go in. And you need to remember that if you're taking any commercial goods with you, if you're going over to an exhibition, got some samples in the back of the car, you will need customs declarations from now on. Didn't before, but now you need to have a list of what you've got with you and values for customs purposes and so on. It needs to be formalized, which it didn't before. What else changed in January? There's a few changes to VAT. And this is where I take to do the bravest thing I've done for a long while. I'm actually going to put a chart up now on VAT, knowing full well I'm talking to an audience of people, including tax specialists. So here goes. What's changed on VAT? First of all, this is the situation before December. Our sales to the EU until December, we used to zero rate our invoices, but we used to have to put the customer's VAT number on our invoice so that they could operate the reverse charge mechanism when it came to paying and reclaiming VAT at their end. And when we're selling goods to consumers, we charged UK rate of VAT and local VAT for digital services. Some of these have now changed. As from the 1st of January, we still zero rate our invoice, but we don't need to quote the customer's VAT number anymore. We can do, no harm done in doing so, but it's no longer a requirement. The EU is now a foreign country, different customs union, so we don't need to quote the VAT number. Now, in terms of business to consumer, goods are still zero unless you're charging under a DDP Inco Terms. I'll talk about Inco Terms later on. But if you're supplying on a delivered duty paid basis, you will have to register for local VAT and charge local VAT. And finally, business to consumer services is also zero now as well. So it's actually simpler than it was before, but there have been changes which people need to take on board. So as well as VAT, what else has changed in January? And my advice on the next one down: agreements, contracts, T's and C's. Businesses need to speak to their solicitors and go in fine detail through any agreements they've got, contracts, terms and conditions, to see whether they're still valid in the new environment. Simple things, for instance, like any references to the EU, the European Union, don't include the UK anymore. So if you've got an exclusivity agreement for distribution in the European Union, that's fine. You need to add the words "and the United Kingdom" now, otherwise it doesn't even cover this country. But really, I recommend you to speak to a specialist solicitor who has EU knowledge and see if what you're operating is still valid in the new situation. Intellectual property has changed, but I have to say this is one that we seem to have got away with quite well, actually. On intellectual property, if you had an EU trademark before December, you were automatically given a GB trademark from the 1st of January as well. So you don't need to apply for a separate British trademark. If you had an EU trademark, it automatically has been added to a GB one as well. And any applications you had for an EU trademark, I think, have been held over for 9 months to get the UK version. So it was similar on registered designs. Didn't need to happen on patents because the European Patent Organization is not an EU body anyway. So any patents you had for the EU, any European patents you had, still include the UK. Data protection, what happened on the 31st of December was that everything was frozen with no changes for up to 6 months to give the UK time to get what's called adequacy, so that the EU will recognise our systems and procedures. I understand that decision is quite imminent now, but my advice on that is to stay close to the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO. Their website is very informative and can give you advice on whether you need to appoint local data representatives in the EU as well. So, so no great changes yet, but things are changing gradually there. Another change that came in on the 1st of January, nothing to do with Brexit, it just happens to be the 1st of January, is that a new regulation for wooden packaging. So anyone using pallets or crates or even wooden cable holders, the regulation has changed, and that wooden packaging now has to have ISPM 15 compliance, which includes heat treatment to avoid infestation. That's coming, it's an international standard, which is catching 1 or 2 people out already as I speak. Another change is to do with the move from CE marking. If you've used CE marking in the past in the UK, there's a new UK mark now called UKCA. It's not compulsory to use it yet until January 2022, but my advice here is to liaise urgently with the local trading standards office and ask them what to do and when to do it. My understanding is that if you're selling into the UK and to the EU, you'll need both labels, the CE mark and the UK CA mark, and as long as one doesn't obliterate the other. So these are all changes that took place in January. So a fair bit for folks to take on board. So that's where we are. What I want to talk about now is what the current issues are. What's people's experiences? What issues and problems are they finding? So, excuse me. The first thing is that we didn't know about Iori numbers. So, despite the fact they've been well publicised for many months now, people still got to January and didn't have their Iori number. And as I said earlier on, with no Iori number, the goods don't move. So that caused a few headaches. And this is quite a common one. People didn't know they had to complete customs declarations. The number of people who said, well, I knew we got a trade deal, Mike, so I didn't know we'd have to do them. So I had to explain that customs declarations are because we've left the customs union, nothing to do with the trade deal. And a number of people not only didn't know they had to complete them, but didn't know what the options were as regards getting other people to complete them for them. So that's caused a few headaches. And I need to get a bit technical now with you, unfortunately, but it is important to you understand the point here. People didn't understand the implication of Inco terms. I hope you can read the next chart. This is there are 11 Inco terms, and 9 of the Inco terms result in exporters doing export customs declarations in the exporter's country, and similarly importers doing the import customs declaration in the importer's country. But there are 2 exceptions, unfortunately. Now, Inco terms are wonderful. They specify in great detail exactly who pays for what. There are a variety of elements of cost during an export transaction, and this chart explains under each Inco terms who exactly is paying for what. So I mentioned that 9 of these Inco terms are straightforward because they seem fair and practical. 2 of them are now a problem, and they are the first one, which is Ex Works, and at the other end of the scale, delivered duty paid, DDP. And it's these 2 Inco terms at the extreme end which are causing problems. Ex Works is an old traditional shipping term which has been used for centuries. And it means basically that the buyer buys the product from the seller, but the buyer pays for everything to do with freight and insurance. Unfortunately, under this particular Inco term, the customs clearance is the responsibility of the buyer. So if you're buying, for instance, some components from Poland on Ex Works terms, yes, you're paying for the freight and insurance, but as the buyer in the UK, you're also responsible for doing a customs declaration in Poland. Now, you have no relationship with the Polish equivalent of HMRC, so that's not only unfair in my view, but also impractical. And I'm advising people who are buying on Ex Works terms to change to FCA as soon as they can. You still pay for the freight, but the exporter is responsible for the exporter's customs declaration. It gets worse at the other end, unfortunately. Delivered duty paid effectively means that the seller pays for everything, for freight and insurance, but also, as you get down the scale there, the customs declaration in the buyer's country is done by the seller. Now, so that means the seller is selling products to, say, France. When it gets to the other side, the seller has to do the import declaration. The seller has to pay for any import duties there may be. The seller has to pay the local import VAT, and therefore has to register for VAT in that country to get it back. In 11 of the 27 countries, they will also have to appoint a local fiscal representative, which obviously isn't going to come cheap. So I'm advising exporters wherever possible to avoid using DDP from now on and to move inside to DAP, which means they can still pay for the freight and insurance, but it's the buyer who is responsible. Sorry, it's the buyer who is responsible for the customs declaration. I'm concerned because a number of the marketplaces like Amazon are pushing their sellers into using DDP, which means everyone selling online through Amazon is now having to get local VAT registration country by country in order to get the VAT back. So it's, and this has caught an awful lot of people out, I'm afraid, despite the fact we warned them 6 months ago. So that's where we are with Inco Terms. I'm sorry it's a bit technical, but it's a really important point, and a point which a number of international traders have not fully taken on board. So, as well as Inco Terms, another thing that people didn't understand, which is also causing them a few problems, is something called rules of origin. We signed a free trade agreement with the EU. Hooray, great stuff. And it means basically that any products which are made in or grown in the United Kingdom will go into the European Union without any duty being paid, and vice versa. Anything originating in the EU coming to the UK, there's no import duty. That applies to goods or crops, products, if you like, which do originate in those countries. It doesn't apply straightforwardly to items which originate somewhere else. So, for instance, if I import a product from China, I pay import duty on that. If I send that product then to France without touching it, without processing it, without transforming it, it's classed as a Chinese product, not as a British product. And so the French importer pays duty as well. So, and there are various stages in between those two extremes where your goods can include some non-UK or EU material. And there are various rules in place. I mentioned the agreement with the EU. There are a number of annexes on rules of origin. It does take some working through, and depending on the commodity code of your product, the rules could vary. So the rules can consist of having to include a particular process to justify that products originate here. It can include calculations involving the percentage of your price, which is represented by imported non-originating material. So just to show you a simple chart, if you're looking at your products, you incur material costs, some of which will be UK materials or EU materials, and some could be non-EU materials. There'll be labour costs, there'll be overhead costs, and of course there's your profit. And adding all those together, you come up with the ex-works selling price. And some of the rules of origin insist that to claim originating products, that the percentage of non-originating materials cannot be more than a certain percentage of the ex-works price. Usually 50, but sometimes different, but usually 50. So you have to prove, for instance, if you're buying stuff in from China, that you're doing things to it to make sure that the original Chinese material cost is less than a certain percentage of your selling price, in which case you can then claim it's originating. If you don't claim it to be originating, then your customer in the EU has to pay import duty. That's the point here. So some of the stuff going from UK to EU or vice versa, there is duty to be paid because those products don't originate in the exporting country. So again, sorry it's a bit technical, that, but it's an important point to make. So talking about issues still, I mentioned that rules of origin, it's obviously being misunderstood. Some folks didn't know about the new export VAT rules. They're getting that wrong. And they didn't realize that there was now VAT on EU imports. And a number of people are now ringing me up saying, I didn't pay VAT on imports before. Why have I got to do it now? And again, the answer is, well, we've left the customs union. So VAT now applies. However, there is some good coming out of all this. A lot of people had found out for the first time they have to pay VAT on imports, but they hadn't heard of the postponed import VAT accounting scheme. This was introduced on the 1st of January and is excellent. It really is. What it means is that if you're now importing products from the EU, there's VAT to pay, but you don't have to pay it at the point of import. You can elect to use the new postponed import VAT accounting scheme. And then what happens is effectively at the end of the next quarter, you do your quarterly VAT return and you effectively pay it and reclaim it at the same time. You don't need to register for it. If you have a VAT registration existing, then you're eligible to use this scheme, as long as you tell the carrier that you're going to use it. Otherwise, you have to pay the import VAT at the point of import. So VAT on imports is now in place, but you don't have to pay it all up front. There's a way of handling it through your quarterly return. I mentioned rules of origin, and what this is resulting in is two unfortunate situations. There's the double duty situation, and this applies particularly with people who are bringing stuff in from China, particularly, and then selling it on to somewhere in the EU. And that product is classed as a Chinese product, not as a British product. And so the British company has imported it and paid duty, and the customer in the EU has then taken it from the UK and also has to pay duty. The even nastier one than that, and this is one that I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and one of Michael Gove's team said that they argued strong for this, but they didn't get it. The EU insisted upon this. The EU re-export duty is caused by, believe it or not, if you buy a product from the EU and then send it from the UK to another country in the EU, duty is payable. So this is happening quite often where people from the mainland Europe sell goods to the UK, and the UK then has a customer in the Republic of Ireland, and the poor old Irish customer gets clobbered with duty. This is a particularly nasty one, and as I say, we did argue long and strong over this one, but we didn't get our way. For both of those scenarios, there is a way around it. It's called something called the customs warehouse or bonded warehouse, whereby you can put products into a bonded warehouse and don't pay any duty or import VAT unless the goods are sold in the domestic market. So if you simply import it and re-export it, only the second country pays duty. So that's a way around that. But it does take some setting up. It can only be done with the permission of HMRC and with the supervision of HMRC. There have been some delays at ports, especially with the courier network and the groupage network. If you cast your mind back a few months, people were forecasting that there would be 40-mile tailbacks from Kent full of HGVs waiting for the roll-on, roll-off service. I'm pleased to report that hasn't been the case. I've picked up very few cases of 40-foot containers being stuck in great queues. The problems I've been made aware of have been for smaller loads than that. Some of the couriers have been under enormous pressure, and there have been delays in that system. And also what's called the groupage network. The groupage network is, imagine a 40-foot container with rather than one lot of goods for one customer, it has maybe 20 different loads on there for 20 different customers, and they're grouped together as one load, and they cross over the channel as one load and then get delivered individually. And the trouble is that unless you've got customs declarations for every single load, the truck doesn't move. So there have been a few problems there, but particularly with stuff coming into the country in the courier network, and one or two of the ports have been under pressure, as we thought they would be. So there are some issues still there. Almost all of those I've been aware of the last few weeks, and people are making the point that this sort of thing has happened, but and they're getting frustrated and a bit confused. But the issue, which isn't on this list yet, which is causing anger rather than confusion and frustration, is Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is causing problems. One or two customers in Northern Ireland are telling our suppliers here in Lincolnshire that they're going to stop buying from Lincolnshire because it's easier to buy from Holland now. And I've even heard one the other day of a guy in Holbeach who couldn't find a carrier to go to Northern Ireland because they were all refusing because it's too complicated. It's an area which I think is going to have to change. And all I can do is feedback this reaction, but certainly Northern Ireland is causing not just a few moans and groans, but downright anger. So those are the issues. In my view, almost all of those are teething problems. They're people getting used to new systems, new procedures, and yes, they're complaining about it. But once they've done that, it'll become second nature going forward. And so once they've got their Iori number, they've got it. For instance, once they understand about customs declarations, they'll always do it, and so on. So once they've done these things, even if it means they're setting up customs warehouses, once they've set it up, they haven't got to do it every single time thereafter. So I'm satisfied that these are pretty much teething problems, which are, yes, a bit of a niggle, but as business people, we cope with these things, don't we? So and businesses are already coping with this. So I'm sure that they will iron out. Got a little way to go. I accept that, but we are on the right road. But Northern Ireland, I think, needs a little bit more than that. So that's all the negative stuff. Yes, there've been issues, as we always thought there would be some issues, but an awful lot of product is flying back and forth between ourselves and the EU already, and hopefully it'll improve as we go over the next 4 to 6 weeks. So let's look at more positive stuff now, shall we? And look at a few opportunities. So I mentioned that we have a trade deal in place with the 27 countries of the EU. Lots of other trade deals in place as well, and still more to follow, which is very positive. There are very few countries with whom we face trade barriers going forward. So the world's your oyster now. And it's been made quite clear that as we recover from the COVID landscape, as indeed we will, then obviously increasing exports will go a long way to aiding that recovery. And what's happened is that if I can just take your mind back to the last general election, December 2019, when the Tories got in, they said that they would introduce a new levelling up initiative. Levelling up is an unashamed attempt to positively discriminate in favour of some parts of the country. And the areas identified have been the Midlands engine, which includes ourselves, includes West Midlands and East Midlands, the Northern Powerhouse, which is the Northwest, the Northeast and Yorkshire Humber, and the Southwest. So it doesn't apply to East of England, London or the Southeast. And what's happened is that to help exporters in these areas, the Department for International Trade have introduced what they call an export growth plan. This was announced, I think, in October of last year. What it means is that there are some additional local advisors. There's been a number of advisors in these areas, including 4 in the East Midlands, one of whom is me in Lincolnshire. So there'll be a number of additional advisors. We've introduced a program called the Export Academy, which is a series of 1-hour training webinars aimed very much at the first-time exporter, things on how to do export pricing, understanding routes to market, getting paid for exports, that kind of thing. So it really is hand-holding, a series of 10 webinars, which delegates can attend one or all of them. It's up to them. But it is real hand-holding, showing where the pitfalls are and how to avoid them. And there's also a thing called the Internationalisation Fund. It's a program of matched funding support. Funding to help people with maybe getting their website internationalized, translation costs, specialized advice on intellectual property or branding, that kind of thing. So it's available, has been since the beginning of the middle of January, and it's now taking off, and it's available to all the country, all the regions within that levelling up area. So what the government has done is just brought out more resources, more training and more funding to help this export effort and encourage folks to go after these opportunities. So that's where we are. We've come through a huge change, one of the biggest changes certainly in my lifetime and probably anyone else's. And there are still some issues to resolve, absolutely, but I believe they are of the teething problem level rather than insurmountable hurdles. So we will come over those, and then obviously as we move forward, there's great reasons to be optimistic. So that's where we are. That's what issues we've got, and how we can look to go forward. So back to you, Matt.
Great. No, thank you very much for that, Mike. That was very informative. No, thank you for going through that. As you can see, there's quite a few things that have changed, obviously, since the 1st of January there. And there's still a fairly few amount of issues as well. And the Northern Ireland point was very interesting, Mike, to say that there's really a lot of barriers there for the UK or Northern Ireland to trade with each other, which hopefully we'll see resolve in the coming months. Like you say, it's a bit of a trial period and see how it goes. And hopefully that will get resolved so the trading between the two countries can increase. But yeah, some really good points to pick out there. The ERI number, that's essential to do any trading between the countries. also the bit about the customs declaration, which could scare a few people, but you can get a customs intermediary to do all that work for you, which I would recommend to our clients to do, because it can be a bit complex, and having the system in place to do it, which is the NEST system, isn't it, Mike? They wouldn't have access to. So some really good points. Obviously, the change of the VAT treatment of the sales to EU is very important as well. So if people just carry on doing the same thing, they're going to have to do that incorrect in regards to the business to the consumer. But like you said, there's also some opportunities there with all the trade deals signed, Mike. So certainly a lot to be optimistic about. But no, thanks again for sharing that with us. And I say this is the opportunity now for anyone attending to have any questions to be passed to Mike. So there is a little Q&A button at the bottom there. So if you want to just write some questions for Mike to answer, and I'm sure he'll be able to give you some feedback. So we'll just see if we can get some questions raised.
I'll just pick on one point, Matt, before we do.
Sure.
You mentioned customs declarations, and you're quite right. It's the responsibility of the importer and exporter to complete customs declarations, but in practice, most won't do it themselves.
No.
Very often it'll be the carrier, or it could be a third party like the Chamber of Commerce, for instance. And my advice is, unless you really know what you're doing, get someone else to do it for you, because they'll charge you for it, but it's peace of mind you're paying for.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally. Yeah. So first question here I've got is about the postponing accounting treatment. So before they used to receive a C79, before they used to on the non-EU stuff. Have they still got to wait for the C79, or is it purely straight on the VAT return? Or
basically what happens now is that at the moment your import is declared, the customs declaration is done. They take your Iori number, of course, and your VAT number. And if you've told the carrier that you're going to use the postponed scheme, they won't try and charge you at the point of import. If you've forgotten to tell them, they will ask you for import VAT at the point of import, and you just reclaim it in the normal way. The way it works with the postponed import VAT accounting scheme is that you'll receive a monthly statement through your HMRC gateway account telling you the import VAT that you've incurred so far. And the next time you do your quarterly return, you effectively pay it and reclaim it at the same time.
Okay.
You don't need to register for it. You don't need to enroll for it in any way. As a registered VAT business, you are eligible to use it anyway.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay. No, thank you for that. Another question that's come up here is, can you employ more than one customs agent, and can they all make declarations on your behalf?
I believe you can appoint as many as you want, I believe.
Okay.
And so similarly, if you're using different carriers for different routes, they can all do declarations for you as well.
Okay. Another question here. Do we still need to pay excise and customs at point of entry?
No, you don't have to. There's a thing called a duty deferment account. So if you are incurring duties, you can pay at a point of import if you want. But if you apply for a duty deferment account, you can pay once a month rather than every time you import.
Okay, that's good. What's we got here? Question here, we import from Finland and our invoice is still showing no VAT, and we have an ERI number and make no reference to Inco Terms. Your comment on there, feedback on that, Mike?
Any invoice you receive should have Inco Terms on there. Otherwise, how do the parties know who's paying for what? But your Finnish supplier shouldn't be charging you VAT because it's an export for them. But you'll have to account for your import VAT after it's arrived, as we've discussed with the postponed scheme. But your Finnish supplier shouldn't charge VAT, but you'll have to. But as regards the Inco Terms, yes, you need to, even before the invoice stage, at the point of order, you should be agreeing who's paying for what. So on any order acknowledgement, it should say Inco Terms and what they are, and if you don't agree with who's covering what, then take it up with the supplier.
Okay. So have we got any more questions for Mike here? Okay. So going back to the point on Intrastat, is it the same as before? Nothing changes to the usual procedures, or how long is this going to last for?
I
I know you mentioned
understand.
for a year, Mike.
I understand that Intrastat is only there for imports now, just for the rest of this year, just as a reporting tool.
Okay, and
So
is there any plans to extend after this year, or?
I believe we'll have our own system in place after that.
Okay.
There'll be no getting away from it. You'll have to do something, certainly, but
okay. Okay. Right. This is another question here. So there seems to be no resource where I can access definitive requirements to what might be required for a specific exported product, either here or in the EU. I'm currently having 2 pallets returned to me from Madrid Customs containing deli, condiments, chutneys, etc. I supplied all the correct paperwork I believe was needed. Nothing constituted POAO. However, apparently the Spanish receiver now needs an import license to import any foodstuffs from the UK, which is a 2-year rigorous course. This is a flat rate requirement, even if importing. Yet we are unaware of this at the time of importing. Got any comment on that one? It's quite in depth, but
yeah, it's something sector specific as well. And I would suggest that the best advice there should come from DEFRA, probably.
okay.
But I have heard stories that food exporters will need some sort of nominated food representative, for want of a better word, in some EU countries. I can't confirm that, but I would think that DEFRA would be the best point of contact there. I'm just a generalist, obviously, and there are some sector-specific items which I'm not going to guess on. It would be dangerous.
Okay, no, that's good, Mike. Any more questions for Mike there? There's some few good ones that come through there. No.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question of Moore Thompson then, please? I mentioned that when people are supplying on delivered duty paid terms, they are responsible for paying import VAT in foreign countries. And in some countries, you'll be required to appoint a local fiscal representative. No one knows where to start with this, and I would suggest that the smarter accounting companies will recognise a revenue opportunity there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, yeah, I think there is a list of people you can use, aren't there, on HMRC's website? Is that correct, Mike? Or
I'm not sure there is. There might be.
Is there not?
There's lists of customs agents there.
Right.
I'm not sure there's people who are actually able to find local fiscal representatives.
Okay. Well, that's obviously something we can look at, Mike. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks for that point. So, but no, thanks again, Mike, for today. It was very informative, and obviously we've had some interest there, and the questions have been asked. So, pleasure. Thank you very much for coming today to do this. So, yes, and so thanks everyone else for coming. And if any questions, then feel free to contact myself. Email address it's matthewstory@morty.co.uk. Or you can phone 01775 711 333. Oh, I've got another question that just come through here. It just says that we are an ERI registered and are based in Peterborough. Could you recommend a local customs agent?
I don't know specifically of customs agents. What I would recommend is the local Chamber of Commerce, in your case, the Cambridgeshire Chamber of Commerce. Or I would look to use your actual carrier to act as your customs agent.
Okay.
All right.
Brilliant. No, thanks, Mike. No, I just literally just came in. It's just about to wrap up. So, yeah, no, that's great. No, thank you very much for coming. And yeah, we'll hope to see you all soon. Thanks a lot. Cheers.